How do you think the notion of romance has changed as far as
Ugh.
how we go about it, and maybe even like whether or not that's something that's looked for right
Romance
off the
is
bat?
fucking dead. The notion of romance, man, when I was growing up, my dad was like my first real male relationship. And that man spoiled the shit out of me. I received flowers, I had poems, I had notes every morning when I woke up. My coffee was made with my mug set out and a note inside of it. Like, my dad made me feel like the most special girl ever. And I feel like nowadays, I don't know, that aspect of romance and, like, in a way, chivalry is kind of like, because, you know, like we were talking about earlier, like holding the door open for a girl or something. Get me fucking flowers, you know? Like, I want romance. I think that's beautiful, and I'm not at all saying that it should just be the man that does this. I write notes to Thomas. Like, romance should be both-sided. Like, woman, pick up your man, have a romantic picnic, go up on the parkway, stargaze, and vice versa. Like, romance is essential to a relationship. Like, I'm convinced that that's why so many long-term relationships die out. Because, like, you start taking that connection for granted, and that romance just goes away.
Well, I guess with technology, again, romance is like, text me good night, like, every night before bed, and text me good morning, and, like, tell me I'm pretty, like, and, I don't know, I'd rather see, like, a gesture, like, a genuine, like, romantic gesture, or, like, do something nice or something thoughtful, rather than, I really don't want any relationship that's based off of text. I wish I could just do away with my phone altogether.
We've been force-feed romance since we were babies when they gendered us. I remember when people would, like, boys would, like, you know, hit on me, like, do terrible things, like, oh, he just must like you, and it's like, but is this what it's supposed to be about? Then when I got to my teenage years, you know, see, like, PG-13 movies and people kissing and stuff, like, it just got me, like, you know, a weird feeling, I want this too, and stuff. And then as a female, they, like, raise you up for marriage and, like, your relationships and your boyfriend, like, boyfriend things, and, like, Valentine's Day. So I've been, like, stockpiled, like, what romance is supposed to be. And I get into my own romance, it's kind of like, do I want to follow this, like, you know, status quo? Or, like, you know, try to make it my own, like, go, like, off the end. So I kind of feel that we're just, like, programmed to have romance. Like, everything is red. And kissing, and, like, emotional stuff, and, like, sex is, like, you know, the ultimate form of it, which is definitely not true. It's kind of like the shortcut that fucks everything up.
I think it's become really blurred because the movies sugarcoat it even in the old days. Everything's sugarcoated, so we don't really know what to do because we don't have conversations about it.
Well, I mean, let's think about what people do nowadays as a romantic gesture. I know for me that, you know, it's just something simple, but it's not a bad thing, is that, you know, I like to have a decent meal now and then. I like to cook something nice. You know, and if I'm sharing that experience and, you know, bonding with someone while doing that, I mean, that's romantic to me in that sort of sense. And I feel like that there's a lot of missed opportunities for a more physical romance, not sexual, but, you know, just being there with someone. People often take that for granted because you spend so much time looking down at your phone, you know, playing games or on social media or something. I like to think about that test of how to emotionally connect with someone in 5 minutes, and that you just stop and you stare at them and don't say anything. And it's amazing how, you know, people take that for granted now because there's not that sort of physical connectivity. I remember that there was in one of my relationships at one point, you know, it was just like a speed texting thing to say goodnight or whatever. There was these things that I would always say, you know, it would be good night, I love you, and sweet dreams. And I had all of those on speed text. So, I mean, honestly, I could just pull up, you know, the quick text menu, just click on those 3 things and then send it. And, you know, that there's a disconnect of emotion there. I mean, it's so much differently whenever you're telling someone bye in person, whether they're going to be gone for, you know, a day, a week, a month, whatever. I feel like that there's a disconnect there. You're completely connected to them in some form or fashion. But I think that there's a lot of good to have some sort of separation. And I know that that's one thing that I've tried to kind of do a little more in this relationship, is that if I'm at work, I'm at work. I mean, I'm not going to text you. I'm not going to talk to you. And if you're at work, you're at work. I'm not going to text you. I'm not going to come and visit you, because that's not what you're there to do. You go there, you do your job, then you can come home and we can talk about it. And if you've had a shitty day, I can cheer you up. If you've had a good day, well, then we can talk about it. And you can share those joys with me or with your significant other or whoever. And it's something more special than just sending it as literature.
I think romance isn't a huge thing. And I also think, like, we're college students, like I'm 21 years old, if I could afford like a million flowers, I probably would. I can't, but romance is more than that. I feel like we are like a nation of consumers, and being romantic means bringing someone flowers or chocolate or, buying something they like. But when really romance should just be time. And I feel like that's something we don't have a lot of either. Like, I go to school and I have a job, and you need time to plan things out and be romantic. I just think we lack that at this age. But it's definitely something to, like, keep in mind. And honestly, romance is just a way to care for somebody. And if you can do that, then you're good.
I guess I know plenty of people who are cynical, and they say that, like, divorce rates are so high. But at one time they loved each other, so that was technically romance. So I guess before, when romance meant it lasted forever, like, I guess even in 1990s Disney movies we still said that. But then today, a lot of us, at least our age, are seeing it, or even younger kids. I've talked to kids that, like, I'm at schools with and I'm teaching. They say all the time how their parents are divorced, or their parents are getting divorced, or they hope their parents get divorced. Like, all these issues, to where they still think their parents loved each other at a point, there's no doubt, but they don't think that has to last forever. So romance can be a fleeting moment and not necessarily an entire lifetime.
I think in a world of like fast and easy dating, there's definitely been kind of like an emphasis put on like casualness and kind of like not wanting to get super attached to someone. At least in like the social groups that I've been part of, there's this big like, I don't want to be like tied down, like I don't want to have to like commit to one person, and so maybe in that romance has been lost a little bit, but I think that we still are very much like attached to these like older ideas of romance of like, I will devote myself to you, and like I will spend so much time and energy on you, and like and it's very monogamous, our ideas of what romance can look like. They're always centered around one person. The idea that you can be like super romantic with several people is kind of like, well, it's cheating. And I'm really excited about the fact that I realized that I can be romantic with several people and not be like feel guilty about it.
We don't want to spend time on anything. Like, if we want something, we want it immediately, and I think that kind of makes it hard for romance to still be in many people's minds, because romance is, I think, that same thing like I was talking about earlier with nurturing something. Like, you don't get romance immediately. Like, you have to work for it, and if your attention span is so short, you don't want to work for it, and so what's the point?
I think that's where a lot of people get into trouble, because they romanticize everything. So I know my generation, where I grew up in high school, it was right in the middle of the twilight phase, and so a lot of my friends who were heterosexual girls were, I need a man to come and save me and take care of me and do all these things. It was basically like associating that whole like princess concept, where they need a prince in shining armor. And I think that has, at least I like to think that's changed, especially with the way young women especially are presented with fiction now. The Hunger Games and, Divergent you have a lot of really self-reliant, active young women who can really influence female youth at a young age to not look for men who can come in and save them. And so I think the idea of romance has then changed because it's not like people rely on the man in the relationship to do the romancing. Obviously, I've been out of the heterosexual dating scene for a while now. And so with Adam and I, romance ends up being like spontaneity. Like, hey, you know, put on a dress shirt and some nice pants. We're going to go out somewhere nice. Or I know this movie's been playing and I really think you'd like it and you've been talking about it a lot. We're just going to go. And that seems to work for us.
It's really interesting. I think nowadays people don't look for romance as much as they used to. They look for friendship or companionship. If you want to be with someone for the rest of your life, you look for someone who you would want to spend that time with rather than someone who could like charm you or sweep you off your feet, because people know nowadays like those people aren't the most interesting people. And I think today's society tends to enjoy intellect more than charisma. I mean, that's just me personally, and then most people that I've met. But I know people also like charismatic people, so I understand if people look for romance more than they look for companionship. But I just think it's become more of a 50-50.
I have a strange belief on romance. Well, not strange. It's just different than, I guess, the norm in our country. It's a function. It's just a function of human life. You know what I mean? We're attracted to each other for the sheer purpose of, breeding. And if you're not breeding, then there's no real function behind it other than fulfilling that need. You know what I mean? For me, it's simpler that way, to think of it that way. It's just a part of life. You need communication with other people. Like, you need to communicate with other people. It's healthy for you. You need to keep yourself busy. You need to work on something and accomplish little goals, you know what I mean, that feeds the human soul. You need intimacy. You need it. Some people don't, but a lot of people